We're on. Okay. Welcome all. I want to start with a little bit of a reading. Some of you may have heard this one from me before. It's one of my favorite ones as we light our chalice. This is from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki. He writes, in Japan, we have the phrase Shoshin, which means beginner's mind. The goal of practice is always to keep our beginner's mind. This does not mean a closed mind, but actually an empty mind and a ready mind. If your mind is empty, it is always ready for anything. It is open to everything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. In the beginner's mind, there is no thought, I have attained something. All self-centered thoughts limit our vast mind. When we have no thought of achievement, no thought of self, we are true beginners. Then we can really learn something. The beginner's mind is the mind of compassion. When our mind is compassionate, it is boundless. I like to read that every once in a while as we begin workshops, etc., to remind me as well as all of us that none of us come to this as experts. We are all continual learners, and we learn from each other. And so I'm looking forward to sharing with you the second session. The first session is online if you want to review it or haven't seen it. And as I said last week, if you got questions, interrupt me by writing them over here on the left on the chat, and I will try to get to them. In setting this up, since last week we sort of covered the broad overview of what it meant to be multi-site, this week I thought we would go into some detail about 5 congregations I know of, 3 of whom I've actually worked with. 2 are ministers who are good. The other 2 are ministers who are good friends of mine, and they're the more recent attempts at doing multi-site. So we're going to look at First Unitarian in Albuquerque, which really was the first congregation to get involved in this model. First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Diego was next. Appleton was the next one as far as looking at it, but they, as you'll see as we go through this, they are at a different point in time. And Houston and Golden are within the last year or so, newer congregations coming into this model. All of these are different, so it will give you an idea of a wide range of approaches. On some of them, I go into more detail about the process just because I think it's important to understand how they got to where they are and where they expect to be going as they build stronger multi-site ministries. There are a couple other congregations out there that are in this direction. Western Pennsylvania, I just lost the name. Harrisburg, I think is what it is. Also has a multi-site with 1 downtown and 1 more on the outskirts of town. They're doing that. And I think that's the only other one that's actually doing something right now. So let's begin. I'm starting with Albuquerque since that was the first one. They began this process about 7 years ago, I believe it was. I went out and visited with Christine Robinson, who was the minister there. And we had a conversation about what they were planning. I met some of her team who were developing this model that they wanted to. And their actually first attempt at multi-site, and that is, I forgot to do this, didn't I? Gives you a little better view of what's going on. This is, the first thing was they just recently built a larger sanctuary. And so their sanctuary was not large enough to meet all of what they were trying to do, and they were looking for some different models of doing worship. And Christine Robinson is one of these folks who tries to stay on the cutting edge of technology, and she's one of the first ministers besides myself who started looking at multi-site models, and decided to do what they called the cafe model, which is on the same campus, but in a different location on the same campus, to have another site simultaneous with Sunday morning. And what that was a much more relaxed site. This was a location on their campus, a large room, and they had the screen in there for the sermon, But the rest of the service was led from that site. People could get up and walk around, have coffee, have donuts, be a little bit more relaxed setting, and then they would stream the sermon in when it was appropriate for the sermon. This is a model a lot of the larger mainstream congregations use, and they would often, as I said last week, have several rooms or other locations on the same campus where they would have different styles of worship. One would be more such as Western music, another more gospel music, another more rock music, and the sermon would be again simultaneously sent in, but the rest of the service was led from that locale. Streamed live, yes, Linda. In this particular setting, or this particular model of having it streamed live to another building or another room on the same campus. This gives wide range of options for doing something on the same campus if you have a large enough setting for that. But it was how some of these multi-sites started. But they moved into other areas, and first Albuquerque's dream was to go beyond this too. It was to reach the what they call their branch ministry, and to reach out throughout New Mexico to a wider range of Unitarian Universalist congregations and small groups who were meeting out there. They also had a group of people that came in from about 30 miles over the mountains southeast of Albuquerque, and that's the East Mountain Group you can see up here in the logo at the top. They were lobbying to have something more local for themselves, and so they, Christine, who was really energetic, really pushed to develop this program and brought some people in, and their goals was to identify clusters of Unitarian Universalists throughout New Mexico not served by local congregations. So their first goal was to find those areas not served by a congregation and bring the Unitarian Universalist message there in some fashion. The other was to fully integrate those branch congregations into First Unitarian with, as they say here, all rights and responsibilities of full membership. Again, one of the differences on this model as opposed to the model where you just spin off a congregation is it's one congregation meeting in multiple locations. So one staff, one board, mainly committees that serve all of the congregations, all of the sites, although there might be some specific committees to specific branches in this case. But again, everybody is a member of First Unitarian in Albuquerque, in all of their branches, as they call them. And their other goal for the program was to create policies and procedures for First Unitarian and integrating these congregations. Recognizing that this was a new model, a different way of doing things, recognizing that this would mean there would be some members who might never come to the campus in Albuquerque, but still be members of that congregation. So how to really integrate those congregations and their members in there was an important thing for them. And then the other thing that looking beyond just what they were doing was to create what Christine felt was a model that could be replicated elsewhere. And so these were their real goals in doing this. And I think in many ways that they have met these goals. But again, and just as I said last week, one of the things I've learned in several cases of looking at this is in order to do this type of ministry, you really need to have somebody overseeing it. So one of the first, what I would say is the early vital step was she recruited and trained a branch organizer. This was the person that would identify where the Unitarian Universalists were in New Mexico and talk to them about the concept and see what they were interested in joining in. Then also the reverse, learn what their needs were, what their expectations might be. If they were going to be part of this larger congregation that they may not ever really visit in Albuquerque, but are still going to be members of that congregation. How do they connect? And as the branches started up, the branch organizer, with the support of the full staff at First Unitarian, trained leadership in each of those areas and mentored them. Because again, one of the models here in multi-site, and particularly when you're doing the branch model, that was the next step after having the cafe model on their campus, was clearly you needed local talents to lead the worship services, to plan any of the events that they might have locally, and do all of that. So it was important to have someone that was working with them to create this. So as you can see, First Unitarian in Albuquerque, under Christine Robinson's guidance, had some really clear goals, and really what I think was a pretty clear understanding of what it was going to take to develop this ministry. So it was not just to get the cafe model on their campus off the ground, but to then reach beyond that and into the next level. So their goal was for First Unitarian to identify and train organized branch congregations to begin in September in 2007. So that means I think they must have started talking about this as far back as 2005. I'm trying to think. It was probably about 2006 I went out and met with them in Albuquerque, and saw what they were doing and learned from what they were doing. So they actually met that in 2007, Socorro and in the East Mountains both joined. So here's the East Mountain group is the one that you can see just east of Albuquerque. That's the group of people that had a good number who were actually members of First Unitarian, but were tired of traveling the distance over the mountains to get there. Socorro then was the one south here. Again, some 60 more miles or more miles from Albuquerque. So, good distance, but to travel and be there. And then the other one, Carlsbad, in the sort of southeast corner of New Mexico, would join them in 2009. So now they have, at this stage, 3 branches. These are all sites of First Unitarian Albuquerque, and they are not separate congregations. They don't have their boards. They have committees that oversee things and work with the staff of First Albuquerque. And in these cases now, they take a video to these congregations that they play, as opposed to trying to stream it. And so that's what's happening in these particular congregations now, is they'll have a video of a sermon that they will play. So this is how they do it. From their main camera. Actually, it started with a video. This is the more recent thing. From the camera at the main site, they project to the campus. As I said, in their cafe, they create a file, and Laurie could probably say more about what that file is. They would put it in the Dropbox for the branches and upload it to YouTube. So the branches then did not have to have a DVD sent to them now. They did when they first started this back in 2007, but now they have it set up so they can do it all over the computer, with the internet, and connect it in that fashion. And they also upload it to their website and create DVDs, which they then share, beyond this, beyond their this particular model of branches. So these are some of the things they learned about doing this with the projector, is to have a large screen TV or a projector in screen, and the 110% rule is to project 110% of real life. That the amount of the light in the room makes a big difference, especially for faces. The better the projector, the more ambient light it can handle, and the quality of the screen matters. And also quiet projectors, because you're doing this as part of a worship service. So again, these are the things that they learned over the years of how to use the video display in doing that. One of the things that has always been a conversation with congregations that are using this video and using it onto a screen is, will people accept that? And when I talked with the leadership in San Diego, in North San Diego County, one of the major congregations, as a leader in developing multi-sites and in training other people on multi-site work. They were afraid of that. They said they admitted it first as well. But what they found out is that people actually liked it, and the generation that they were most afraid of not liking it, of course, was the older generations. And what they heard back from them was they could actually see and hear better when it was projected on a larger screen. So it was easier than, say, in a sanctuary where there's all sorts of other things going on, and the pulpit may be so far away that you don't see who is in the pulpit that close up. And so one of the things they learned was that if you followed what's on the list here that Christine has, and did this well and projected it large, we're not talking about a 32-inch TV screen here. We're talking about as big projection as possible. It was, people really liked it, and so that I think is one of our big challenges as in our congregations as Unitarian Universalists too, because one of the things I've heard back from some people, and we've talked about this, is, I'm not sure my people are going to be willing to look at somebody preaching on the screen. Then the other thing, of course, is how do you ensure that these other sites have quality small group worship? So Christine has spent a lot of time in training people at the local level in doing this. So again, she's well organized here. You can see this. Find a meeting place with some beauty in it, whether that's something you create or whether that's a natural setting. Don't just be in a boxed room and figure that's going to work. Train worship leaders and help them understand that they are really spiritual leaders in their particular site and doing this. Pick music people who can and will sing, because again, part of the importance is to have that type of energy at the locale. And again, don't try to mimic the larger congregation. Recognize that one of the options that this multi-site gives you is the option to really fill the needs of the locale where you are, to have the setting fit who you are and not try to be something that you're not. And so if you're sitting in a room with only 25 people and you live, 70 miles from the city, and so you're in an area in New Mexico that's more ranch oriented or something like that, kick back and have, allow for that. People will have the music reflect whatever the style is that people are, and do that. And again, she stresses the importance of really having people at the locale interact with each other, and what she calls add ritual. Recognize that each site has to have its own ritual, because again, unlike the older model where you would send the whole service to somebody and they just sit there and do nothing except watch what was on the screen, this model really allows for the local people to add their own rituals, add their own music, add their own style of who they are and where they are located. And so this is really important to recognize that's what this allows us to do. And that's one of the things that excites me about this model, because it allows us, possibly for congregations that are willing to do that, to go into communities and areas that we really otherwise might not be able to reach. Now, again, Christine, being who she is, took this another level, and that is they created a subscription series, 4 video sermons a year offered to lay-led congregations. The package includes a DVD, worship suggestions, readings, a text of the sermon, and the cost is only $100 a year. So they have a good number of okay, I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. Okay, I guess there is not another slide on this. I thought there was. So anyway, yeah, there is another slide that I may have. Oh, there it is. It just looked the same. Sorry. the sermons that she sends out are what she calls UU 101. Again, I guess the basic assumption here is that these fellowships that are further afield in their regular Sunday programming do not have somebody that is talking about where Unitarian Universalism today and who we are. And the feedback she's gotten is that this has been really popular and useful for them. And so Christine, the First Unitarian folks, would like more congregations to do this, meaning not more congregations necessarily buy subscriptions from them, but other congregations taking up this piece of the model that was a spin-off of their other multi-site work. That since they'd already, been videoing the sermons and doing this, this was another step to go to really, spread the Unitarian Universalist tradition beyond the First Unitarian in Albuquerque. And so this has, been an exciting program to watch develop, and the work that has gone on in Albuquerque. And Christine has led workshops about this. There will be a workshop at General Assembly this year, and I think she's part of it again. And so, but it's part of the Mountain Desert District and part of the Pacific Western region, which we all are part of. And so I'm hoping that if you all are traveling around our region, that you might drop in at First Unitarian and see what they're doing. It's well worth the trip. And again, where do folks find the info about the subscription series? On their website. You go to their website. Sorry that I don't have the exact link to it, but my recollection was it was relatively easy to find compared to some of the things I was looking at when I was looking for some of these congregations. The next congregation was one I worked a little more intimately with, which was First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Diego. This was a congregation, again, as I talked about last week, is really landlocked. I mean, they have a beautiful campus here, but what you can't see is behind them is some of their meeting rooms and their meeting house is what they call it, their sanctuary. On the other side of the building that you're seeing right in front is the parking lot, and off to the left is one of the major hospitals in San Diego. So they are sort of, and off to the right is a natural area, a ravine, and so they really had nowhere to build. And this is a congregation that has been dedicated to working on multicultural ministry over the years. And so they wanted to see if they could use this particular model and move into some areas where they could really have a strong multicultural ministry. So what I'm going to share with you now, because I thought it would be useful, is something you can see is dated. It's dated January 20, 2008. I asked them to create this for me back in 2008 so I could share this in some workshops I was doing that year on multi-site to give the sense of what First UU Church in San Diego went through. And again, learning from others, they had an intern that was with them that year that was interested in this. And so they basically turned the oversight of creating this project over to Carol. And she's the one that created this PowerPoint for me. You can download these from the Pacific Western Region website so that you can have the whole slideshow that I'm using here if you want. And if you really want just the one from San Diego, drop me an email and I can pull it out and email it to you that way too. But these slides from last week and this week are available online, so you can have all of them. All right. Their vision was to take liberal religious voice to a diverse, underserved population and have a second campus in what's called the South Bay. As I think you probably all know, San Diego is practically on the border with Mexico and is right on the ocean. So they were looking to go between where their congregation was in San Diego and the Mexican border and find some site there intentionally to embrace the diversity of the region. Um, so they again realized, particularly looking at some of the other resources of the UUA, and they knew again that they had to plan, be intentional about what they were doing, and not just assume their good intentions were enough. So this is one thing I wanted to share with you here is from the beginning they looked at this and understood it was going to take time. They figured at the beginning that the planning phase itself was going to take up to 2 years. And then after that, it would be up to a year, what they call the gathering phase, before they would really begin public ministry. And so they were looking at upwards of 3 years, and it was close to that by the time I think it came off. This was pretty good planning before they really did services. One of the things that we jump into in developing multi-site too much is people want to immediately, move into worshiping at another site. They want to do that right away. One of the things that we have learned is that there's too many things that pop up not to take your time in the planning. Yeah, you can share these, Linda. That's fine. I mean, this is most of what I've got on my slideshows. People know that I borrowed it from them, and it's been put together over the last 6 years or so as I've been doing this work for about 8 or 10 years now. Okay, so they realized that they needed. This is their structure, just as I shared with you, Albuquerque's structure. This was their structure. They had a large group that met monthly. They had a steering committee that did the oversight, and then they had various task groups that met as necessary. Their task groups were, as it says here, location, demographic study, grant writing. They wrote some grants. This is one of the other things that I think both First Albuquerque and First San Diego did, is they got grants from the UU Grants Panel, and they got chalice lighter grants and things like that as they started this effort here. They had an RE task group, a worship task group. So they had all of these various task groups working simultaneously to look at what the needs would be in creating this second site. So again, they looked at demographics. They looked at where they might move into, and this you don't really need to look at this closely. I'm just doing this to show you that they took this seriously enough to spend the money to get a Percept demographic study, so that they could look at the area. First Church is probably in the upper quadrant, the northwest quadrant of this, and the new site is more in the south central quadrant, as it turned out, as they moved on that. So this is a percentage of 2,000 overall population in that. But again, this is how detailed they got it and how serious they were about really seeking out sites where they thought they could have a chance of a multicultural ministry as they moved on to this. So, and this was, their plan from the beginning was to help the congregation understand that they were moving into multi-campuses. They were served by one board, one ministry team, one professional staff. Now, one of the benefits that the two congregations I've been talking to you so far about is they were larger congregations. They had more than one minister. They tended to have interns regularly. They had RE directors. They had full-time administrators, if not full-time music people. That they had several music people on staff. And so these were congregations, that were well set to move into this multiple campus, one church model here. Again, it's all funded by one budget. So when people are members of one of the other sites, they are canvassed just like the other members, and they contribute to the one budget. They recruited lay leaders this being a little closer than the San Diego, the Albuquerque situation. Albuquerque clearly was creating sites that were greater distances away, and therefore spent their effort in training people who were living in those areas. the second site here for First Church San Diego is not mileage-wise is not that as far away, and so they really pulled some leadership out of their congregation to help begin down there, and coordinated again by one facilitator. Shared sermons, and they have used all models of DVD, a live feed, one ministry team, where people would give live sermons at the second site as well. So the target was to start with 150 adults. They didn't quite reach that. I was there for their kickoff Sunday, but they realized that maybe that was a little too ambitious, but they continued to not be discouraged. One of the problems they had in hitting this level is they ran into two problems, to be honest. One, the site they chose was a school because they wanted to do something on Sunday morning at the appropriate hour and not have to be in a place where they had to do it at 1 p.m. or something like that. But the school was not as easy to get to and not as visible. Their second problem, to be honest, was they hired somebody to be the oversight of that who really did not work out, who turned out to have their own agenda. One of the things that they found didn't work out, part of their initial plan was to do these mass mailings before the first worship service. And this was at a time period, if you recall, when the UUA was doing a lot of pushing on doing these mailings. And they had the UUA postcard and things like that. In analysis of that did not work out that well. They felt that wasn't value for the money spent on that. They probably would have done, by the time they got around to creating it, they probably would have done better by using stuff on the internet and that fashion. But and that's Ian saying he tried the same thing with the postcards and had very little return. So I think we moved to a phase in that trying to gather more people by using Facebook, by using other methods of doing that. I even found that when we were doing a moving sale here where I am in Prescott, that I probably turned out as many people from putting things up on Facebook and some of the other linkage sites there for people in the Prescott area than a newspaper ad. So this was their goal, as you can see, to again have all of this to be accessible, to be worship space large enough, and all of that. So that's one of the reasons they also picked the school, is that they had a room that was large enough to seat this. But they did get several grants, and they did, as you can see from these pictures, which are taken from that site, reach out to a multicultural neighborhood. And they, again, one of the things that the support system that they had was having a full-time RE director, who also had a staff people, so that they could create an RE program to begin with at this other site. Not all congregations that are doing the other sites are able to do that. And their worship program, you can see here, this is their intern, Emily, and in the back you can see the screen, and which is often where they, not only do they project the words in both English and Spanish, often for the songs and other things that are readings, but when they do a projection of a sermon, it's up there as well. So they moved from the school to a storefront piece of property, not as large, not necessarily the 150 seat place, because they realized they weren't reaching that, but in a neighborhood where they were accessible and visible 24/7. And so this is where they moved, and here they have been very successful, and they are filling this place fairly regularly with folks, and reaching out more into the community and being there, particularly being at the border, being involved in immigrant issues, and being visible in the community in a way that is putting them out in the larger community so that they are recognized as a partner in this border community here in the South Bay. So just to give you a sense here of what their schedule might look like, this is just this couple of weeks here. This is what you can find on their website. The Hillcrest campus is got their 9:30 and 11:30 services. Still has the two services, but the South Bay campus has a 9:30 service. Intergenerational, bilingual, Spanish and English programming, and has been attracting a bilingual group of people. And as you can see here, you can see that they have a different range of things. Most they have now moved toward mainly having live leaders and of their ministry staff and preaching, but they still do use, I think, occasional video sermon as well. And so Arvid Straube is the senior minister, and Kathleen Owens is the associate, although Arvid's retiring and Kathleen has been called as the new lead minister. And they have, this year, Elizabeth Buki is their intern. And so, with a staff of 3 ministers, are able to rotate between the 2 campuses and the services. If you saw the whole month, you'd see some of these sermon titles repeat later on at the South Bay service from what were given at the Hillcrest service. But they have, again, a theme each month, and whatever the service is at whatever campus, they try to keep it at least along the same theme, if they're not always sharing the same sermons on that. So that gives you a sense of what they're able to do with the staffing level that they have and how they achieve that. And, after trial and error at the starting, both with their building and with their staffing and with their location, they are I think, really are taking off really well right now with this particular model. And as I've said several times, both last week and this week, this is one of the things that excites me because if we really, I think, are committed to multicultural ministry, I don't think we can expect that it's going to happen at the existing sites of our congregations right now. But the opportunity that we have, as First San Diego has shown, of going into neighborhoods in our same larger communities and offering our Unitarian Universalist message in a way that fits with that particular locale, worship, that fits with that particular locale, can work. And this is, in fact, there is some cost at the startup to get the building and to train the people and such. In the long run, we're not taking another minister and throwing that minister out on their own, in an ethnic community and expecting them to create a strong congregation. We have the backing of an existing congregation, and it's all part of the same congregation, and it's working well. I'm really pleased with where I've seen them go as they moved ahead. So I just want to remind you, if you got other questions, please jot them down over here in the chat box about these congregations. But although if I don't see anything popping up there, I'm going to rattle on to the next congregation, which is First UU Church of Houston, another model, different. We've seen 2 models, the 2 earliest of our congregations that have gotten involved in this, and First UU Church of Houston created even another model of how to approach multi-site. And this, as you can see from this, it's new. It's just started this past year. It took them a couple of years of conversations before they got to this point. They don't have the resource. They don't have the stuff online. I talked to the minister, and he, just did not have anything like I shared with you from Albuquerque and San Diego about their process or all of that. So I've created some slides myself from what I could find on their websites and their Facebook page. So while it took a year or 2 of conversations with the 2 smaller existing groups in Thoreau and Safford and Copperfield, Northwest Houston, that's what the map is above. You see the heading here, is you can see the arrows pointing to the 3 locations here in the greater Houston area. So after the other two congregations were struggling. They had gone through several ministers, had part-time ministers. One had a plan to raise money to buy their own building, and it fell through. And so they started conversations a couple of years ago, and this past July, the other two congregations gave up their lay leadership model to allow for that the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston's board would be the board. The ministry and part-time ministry that they had became part of the First Unitarian Universalist Church ministry team, and they have become one congregation. So again, here we have another model of a stable, strong, historic congregation in a community, really merging, adopting, whatever you want to call it, other struggling congregations who recognize that they could best serve Unitarian Universalism by being part of a multi-site congregation. And so again, I think this is another exciting model, particularly when we have in so many of our urban areas in particular, struggling congregations that haven't made it. And, they were that older model where we said, oh yeah, you want to create a congregation out there in the far distant suburbs? We'll give you a couple of our members and maybe a few $1,000s for a couple of years and go to it. And very few of those models have worked without the support, of the sort of one congregation that this multi-site model creates. One of the exciting things, I've been in conversation with some of the staff back in New England, the congregational life staff, and I'll say more about that later tonight. But we've been in conversation with them back in New England, and one of the things they're looking at is talking to some of those small historic congregations that are, not too far from each other, in towns that are only 10, 20 miles away from each other, that were, big churches at one time in those communities, either Unitarian or Universalist, and now are struggling to keep going. And we're talking about how do we, learn from what happened in here at Houston to maybe even create a different model of 2 or 3 small congregations coming together and becoming one multi-site congregation, therefore maybe able to afford staff that would be willing to stay, unlike what happens to those small congregations too often, is they end up with part-time staff that stay for a year or two and then move on to something else. And so I'm excited about the ways in the Unitarian Universalist Association. Right now we are looking to move on to differing models too. So here it is again, as I said, one board of trustees, one nominating committee, one administration, one senior minister, and moving forward in this particular model with these 3 sites. And what the reference here is, this site is a reference to their Facebook page and that they have about this, and so they have a setup where people can go and see what's happening. It was a little more difficult to find the linkage to the other 2 sites on their own page, but they're, given that they're new at it, I guess I'll give them some time, to develop those stronger visibilities and connections. They also developed a model that has 3 groups of people that they try to train in the other sites, those that can share the story, those that were teams to deal with the range of things that come out, and then the technology. Story is where we've been, where we are, and where we think we are going. So they're continually sharing that with each other, so as they develop and move forward with their vision, and making sure that it's transparent, as they move forward. Teams is the chronicle of simplifying church to form collaborative teams across the campuses to do the essential work of the congregation, not just, again, having 30 different replications at all the different sites, but having collaborative teams across campuses that do the basic work of the multi-site. And then moving into trying to decide how to use the technology across the 3 sites. And they're still, looking at that. So again, their model This is from their website. They have these, click on and look at our different sites, and these are where they're located, so you can find them and find the map, and that's kind of cool on that level. But they really are still, in their first year of doing this, and so they're, I think, trying to learn how best to share the resources. And one of the resources that they're looking at sharing is what they call the process of sharing worship resources. And so they have at the First UU site downtown, the Mission, I think it's not Mission District, Museum District, have 3 cameras. And so they're doing this a little more high techy than some of the other congregations. They take the sound from a soundboard, not from the cameras. They sync the audio and the video using a computer, add titles to it. The other 2 campuses have campus ministers who are like I said, the part-time ministers who had served in these other congregations have become ministers of First Unitarian Universalist Church. So the other two newer sites have ministers that are visible and are there, who lead the worship. But most of the time, the sermon is still projected onto the screen. And so this is interesting in that they do have the multiple staff, but they're still using in these other sites the projection on the screen, as opposed to mixing the staff up in the way that First Church in San Diego is doing that. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves and develops on their other 2 campuses. Okay. There we go. All right. We're going to move on to the next congregation. And I even have less information about the next 2 congregations, really. But I wanted to, again, show you a couple more congregations that are actually grappling with what it needs to create multi-site. Golden, Colorado is probably best known for the fact that Peter Morales served this congregation before when he ran for president. They had a real firm program of integrating members that they led workshops at GA, and all of us learned from them, and many of us use their model of a process of bringing members into our congregation. But even though they had done some expansion on their Golden campus, they were realizing that they did not have enough room for everybody that wanted to come in to where they were. So under their current minister, Wendy, they began looking around and realized that they had people further out from where they are in Golden in Evergreen. And so they have begun meeting on the first and third Sundays. Again, this is as we talked about last week, there are different levels of jumping into this model. And so the 3 congregations we've talked about so far, have jumped in pretty heavily into having their various sites up fully and functioning every Sunday. But here at Jefferson, they're taking it a little bit easier in their step toward that. In fact, it was even more difficult for me to find even a connection to the Evergreen campus. They do have a page that you can go to and see some of the programs that are happening there. But the basic information you find out is that they meet in the first and third Sundays only. And as my recollection is, I think they even meet in the afternoons, not in the morning, which allows them to either have the video or a live person come out and be part of theirs. So this is again a newer congregation getting involved with this, congregation that is taking baby steps compared to the 3 congregations whose models I've shared with you so far, but clearly committed to creating a multi-site in Golden, Colorado, which, as most of you know, I'm sure, is sort of southwest of Denver and up in the mountains. And so they are growing Unitarian Universalism further into the mountains in the area where they are, but with this particular model. The last congregation I'm going to share with you is the congregation in Appleton, Wisconsin. And for some of you may have known it as the Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Appleton. But they have begun to pick up just call themselves the Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. a number of congregations have gone this route, trying to have a name that sort of might be a little more generic in a way that people might be more interested in coming, and the Unitarian Universalist ends up a little smaller. On that, we have several congregations in this district that have moved into that particular model, of calling themselves something like this, and then they do say a Unitarian Universalist congregation. So I don't know. I haven't seen that it's made any major difference yet. Fox Valley was already a 600 plus member congregation when they changed their name to The Fellowship. They are actually finishing up a second building campaign on their current site. And they began to explore the multi-site back in 2009. In fact, I went out to Appleton and did a workshop out there in this lovely sanctuary that you see on the screen, and spent a weekend with them going over the possibilities. They were looking at somewhat what Albuquerque's doing, because they have some fellowships that are 60, 70, 80 miles away. They came into this workshop as well, and we had some conversations about how could the congregation in Appleton serve them. But their biggest challenge, I think, was to Oshkosh, which is southwest of Appleton, if I remember correctly. They had they already have 70 members and friends who are members of the congregation in Appleton, and so they have been now almost 5 years in conversation with those in the Oshkosh area, seeing how to create a second site there. But again, they're on the slow track. Because here we are 5 years later. They were talking about it that weekend that I was there with them in 2009, and they are still talking about that. They have moved to having a third Wednesday gathering where they have dinner, worship, and a program for the people in Oshkosh, but they have yet to move into a full-fledged multi-site with Sunday morning programming in Oshkosh. But they still say that's the direction they'd like to go, but they're still having conversations about what that would mean. Appleton is large enough that they do have a second minister, and then do often have some regularly of interns too. So it's they have the staffing fairly similar to these other congregations, but they haven't been able to really take the step to the next level. So, folks, that's what I wanted to do this evening, basically, is to share with you what's out there, basically, in the Unitarian Universalist world. So for me, my questions back to you, and then I have a few more words I want to say about another exciting thing happening, is what might your next steps be in creating a multi-site congregation? What help do you need in exploring and creating a multi-site congregation? And encourage you to look for information from the Congregational Life's multi-site midwife team. Ian, planning is key to the success. Let me get back to that in a minute. Our Congregational Life, which is now the name of the staff group that includes the formerly known as district staff people across the continent. Scott Taylor is our new supervisor, director of Congregational Life. Scott is someone who's he and his wife Karen Anderson has a co-ministry in Rochester, New York. He had begun what he sees as another model in multi-site by going out to one of the smaller congregations outside Rochester with some regularity and trying to develop a relationship there. They haven't moved into the one board, one staff model yet. But they have developed that model, and he he read some of what I wrote. The multi-site midwife team is UUA Congregational Life staff. It's a UUA-wide group that Scott has called together because, as I was saying, in Rochester, he got interested in that, had talked with the folks in Appleton, had read some of my material. And so when he became our supervisor this last year, decided this was a model that was out there. and that he wanted to find some ways to encourage it. So he's created this multi-site midwife team, is what he calls it. It's just started. I think we just had our second conference call yesterday. And so we really haven't got very far. What we're going to try to do is identify congregations out there that are doing it, identify congregations that are interested in moving into some model of multi-site, and also then develop some support systems for those of you who are in it or moving into it. There's also and I don't know, Tandy Rogers is another one of the staff people. She's from the growth team at the UUA, is working with us on this as well, and she's creating these internet groups of people to talk to each other about what it means to move into multi-site. So Ian in particular, because it's really right now what we're trying to do is create connections between staff people who are exploring or doing multi-site. And so Ian, if you're interested in that, we can talk offline about that. But I'm excited about it because it's nice to have somebody in that supervisory role who is excited about this and wants to go, wants to hold this out as a model. Because like myself, Scott believes that this is a model for the future. It is a model that allows us to create a diversity of ministries. It allows us to do a lot of things that we've been talking about wanting to do in reaching different generations, different communities. I could even envision that part of multi-site ministry might, in some congregations, if they have the resources to do that, would move into a campus ministry model, where they would have that as well, particularly in some of those areas where there's 2 or 3 campuses near each other, where you could pull people in from multiple campuses. And the San Diego model going into a multicultural setting and creating a congregation like that gives us, I think gives us a lot of opportunities to do more diversity in our ministry than we've been able to do. We've been talking about wanting to do it, but we haven't been very good, in my opinion, at doing it. This gives us the opportunity to do that. So look for what's more coming out of the multi-site midwife team. Yeah, I'm going to take some water here. There was just an article in the UU World about some of the multi-site stuff. So isolated location, as in the UU Church of Berkeley. Well, you're talking about isolated in the sense that they really have no place to grow or move or do anything else. And this is clearly a model that works for that too. The congregations and the PSWD that we're talking to are Santa Barbara and Santa Monica, both congregations that are bound in where they are. They can't grow anymore. They're older congregations. They built out their site. There's nothing else they can do. So if they want to create broader ministry, they have to look at doing multi-site. And both those congregations have, and those ministers in those congregations and I have been in conversations about what that might look like, where they would move, and what that would be. But neither one has moved to the level of beginning the organizing, as Ian picked up. You really do need that. The planning is key, as you saw, particularly from Albuquerque and San Diego. And I wish I had more of Houston's planning to share with you, but I know they went through a process. They haven't recorded it in the same way the other 2 congregations have. So real planning, real understanding of what it's going to mean for the congregation and moving into that. So I think this is not a quick solution for a congregation that's struggling. This is not a quick solution for a congregation to spread the word or create. It's going to take a couple of years, serious work, to really create whatever model you want to create wherever you are. Okay, Linda, I'm not sure what you're asking to an isolated, as in you really have to want to find us. Okay, yeah. Well, I guess that's true. They sit up on the hill sort of out of locations, if I remember correctly, in Berkeley. They're not down in Berkeley. where the greater part of the population is. But this would be a model where they could have a second site in another section of Berkeley if they wanted to, or nearer the campus or something like that, and allow for them to be more visible in the community, and not just have the one site that is in a more isolated setting, away from where maybe the population base is, or away from an easy drive by it, so you see it sitting there when you drive to work on the morning or something. So I think it has the possibilities for that, if that's the type of isolation you're talking about, is to create more visibility in the community by having another site in the community somewhere else that is more visible. That is either there on Sunday morning or maybe even on a Wednesday night. Again, that's one of the other things. You don't have to necessarily have Sunday morning. Most of the other sites, the multi-sites, do that because people see that as the sort of optimal time to attract people to a worship service is Sunday morning. That's what our culture is used to out of our traditions. So a majority of those congregations that have moved to this have moved to it at that, at that model with doing it on a Sunday morning. But there's no reason that you can't do it differently, like I said. So, well, it's constrained by geography, but I think it's also by visibility. I think it could be both. I think that's part of what Las Vegas is looking at too. They're in a location that is not a highly visible location for what might be the ideal way to reach people in the greater Las Vegas area, and so they have created a couple of sites that are meeting midweek, unless it's changed, Ian, as I recall, in different parts of the greater Las Vegas area where they are more visible. And so this is another way of dealing with that. So yeah, I think it's both. It's for congregations that are isolated in the sense that they're isolated in the site, not being able to expand, but also isolated like congregations that are not visible to the larger community. But again, the key, as I said last week, is that this model takes the energy of somebody behind it. Every one of these congregations I have talked about has a minister in it who sort of led the way, recruited other people to work with them, whether that was in their congregation or people like myself who had done a lot of study of this and analysis of this to help from the outside, getting grants from other communities, locations like the EU Grants Panel or the Chalice Lighter Grants. And when both Albuquerque and First San Diego started, there was a little more money and extension work that was still around that they were able to get. That's not there anymore with the UUA budget, but still, there are resources in, I think, each district and each region to help create these models too. That's pretty much it I have tonight, unless anybody wants to pop another question in there while we're doing that. So I'm hoping that this was not just educational for you all, that you do want to look at creating something more in your communities. I am certainly willing to talk to people at whatever time they might want to talk about this, or whatever level they might want to do that. There's my email address if you want to write me and ask me some questions that pop up, or I will, as soon as the Congregational Life multi-site midwife team becomes more visible and has more clarity about what it's doing, you'll hear more about it, because I will make sure the word gets out in the Western region. The team is created by people from each region. There's a representative from the Congregational Life staff in each region on this team, and I'm the one from the Pacific Western region. So you will be hearing from me as soon as there is more information to share than what I've shared with you so far this evening on that. So share the recordings. write me any questions you have. And one other thing, I'm trying to put together. I think Laurie did send out a document I wrote almost a decade ago and updated 3 or 4 years ago for a workshop I was doing, and it probably needs to be rewritten. But I want to do a new, bigger bibliography, and we'll get that out to you sometime as soon as I can in the next few weeks. So please take a minute to add your voice to our survey. This will pop up when the meeting is closed, and Laurie will send a follow-up email with the survey link, as well as any resources that I get to her in a timely fashion on that. So please do that. And as we close, I don't really have a particular reading I want to share at the closing here, but I just want to share with you that thank you all for coming and listening to this and willing to share the message of what multi-site might mean for our faith, because I really do think it offers us an exciting model for the future as we move more fully into the 21st century and can reach out to a more diverse group of people. So thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you and others in the future. Thank you all. Good night.